All right. Why don't we go ahead and get started? If at any point while we are going through our presentation tonight, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and then we'll kind of go from there. This is our Parent University session on building a culture of literacy at home. And my name is Kelly Day. I am our 612 instructional coach, and I work primarily with our middle school and high school English teachers. For our session tonight, we are going to hit on three main areas. The first being, what is literacy, and kind of what does this look like beyond just reading books? What are some ways to build a culture of literacy at home? And then we'll wrap things up with some online and local resources for supporting literacy. So I want to start off by thinking beyond a book. When we think about literacy, a lot of times the first definition that we go to is being able to read a book, and reading books and enjoying books. But really, literacy goes beyond the pages of a book. Literacy is about how we interact with the world around us through reading, writing, speaking, listening, and creating. So it's how we engage in these literacy experiences, not just during the school day when kids are sitting at a desk and working through math or science or social studies, but also how do we engage with literacy experiences outside of the school day. Something that I think that's important that we keep in mind throughout our presentation tonight is that we need to think a little bit about windows and mirrors. The idea that books or movies, TV shows, the news can show us the world, but it can also show us a reflection of ourselves. Rudine Sims Bishop was the first who was kind of credited with naming this idea of windows and mirrors. Because we know it's important for students to not only see themselves in the books and TV shows and movies that they read and they watch, but also to see new and unfamiliar worlds and experiences. So I want to just take a moment and think about the impact that just reading for 20 minutes a day outside of school can have on a child. If you take a look there, our student A versus student B versus student C, and kind of see how they progress, a student who reads just 20 minutes a day will hear over 1.8 million words a year. They will have read over 850 hours by the time they're in sixth grade, and they will likely score better than 90% of their peers on standardized tests. That is a profound impact. I feel like a lot of times we focus so heavily on reading at home and engaging in literacy experiences when our kids are in elementary school. And then we get to middle school and we get to high school and their lives change a little bit. They get busy with sports and clubs and activities. And we start to kind of fall off a little bit with some of these literacy experiences. But just looking at this impact of 20 minutes a day tells us that we have to continue those experiences all the way through graduation. Reading 20 minutes a day promotes language development, increases brain development, exposes us to a world outside of our own, and can help strengthen family relationships. So how do we do this? How is it manageable? The first thing I want to tell you is that I'm going to share several tips with you, but just pick one goal to work on over a month or so. And these tips are going to work best if you start from a place of evaluating your own literacy habits, thinking about yourself as a reader, as a writer, as somebody who is a critical consumer of media. And like I said, just pick one of these tips to work on for a month and see how that goes. My first suggestion is to create a home library. I'm a book hoarder. I love books. I love having books on my shelves. I love the feeling that books give me. But that's not always possible to have the space or the resources to create a really well-established book or home library. However, the Orion Township Public Library is a great resource. Set up just a book basket. Keep it in one spot in your house. Maybe it's at the foot of your stairs, or it's in the middle of the kitchen table, wherever it is. And keep that basket as your home library. Change books out once a week, once every other week, but make sure it's always in a spot that's centralized, that's going to promote and encourage literacy. This is where we need to evaluate our own habits, and we need to think about how we can be a literacy role model. Having our kids see us reading, see us writing, see us engaging in critical conversations with the media, that's what's going to help encourage our students to do the same. Set aside time to show them that you enjoy reading or that you enjoy journaling, and then try and influence them to try out the same. Think about ways that we can establish family reading rituals. Try and carve out some time together. Obviously, especially when kids get into middle school and high school and everybody's busy, like I said, with sports and activities, sometimes it's hard to carve out time to read together. So the goal is 20 minutes a day. That should be 20 minutes a day. But if that's not possible, then try 10 minutes a day. If you don't have time for 10 minutes a day, then maybe it's 10 minutes 3 times a week or 15 minutes 3 times a week, but something is better than nothing. And if you're unable to spend time reading with your kids, which is understandable, everybody's busy and has obligations, take time to talk to them, whether it's making up stories, talking to them about their day, their world, their experiences, because sometimes we can have the right type of discussion can be even more valuable than reading. So this is an idea that I love. I think about the read aloud, and when our kids are in elementary school, sitting down to read a book at bedtime is habit for a lot of families. But once kids get into those tween and teen years, the idea of sitting down to read a bedtime book is probably less appealing. So maybe think about offering up some alternatives. Maybe it's, hey, let's listen to this great audio book in the car on the way to soccer practice. Or maybe it's, hey, let's try and read 20 minutes before we go to bed tonight, but we're going to listen to the audiobook together. But something else to consider to push beyond a book are podcasts. There are so many podcasts out there right now that are appealing to our tweens and our teens. I've listed a couple here that I want to just talk briefly about, but really, if you just do a quick Google search about teen podcasts, you will get countless lists. Welcome to the Night Vale is kind of a Twilight Zone meets Twin Peaks-ish kind of storytelling. And I believe they put something out maybe twice a month, once every other week. Book Club for Kids is kind of geared more towards middle school. Actual middle schoolers talking about popular books. Sometimes there's a celebrity reading an excerpt from a book. The author of a book might be featured in an interview, but just kind of promoting some of the, some popular middle grade and young adult books. For your student that's a little bit more science-minded, Radio Lab is appealing both to teens and adults. And it's very much science. Stuff You Missed in History Class takes a more, history approach to podcasting, but it's not kind of like, stuffy dates and names type of stuff. They kind of dig into, maybe some of the history of Disney World, for instance, I think was one of their topics that they covered. Youth radio is news for and by teens, and they are not afraid to touch on some more serious topics. Dear Hank and John, this is the podcast with John Green, a pretty popular young adult author, and his brother Hank. And they cover just about anything from books to history to what's going on in the world to how to quit a job. They kind of cover it all. And the last one is one I just recently stumbled across called Mental Music. And this focuses on issues related to teen mental health, which I think is definitely something that's very relevant today. So thinking about ways to kind of change up the read aloud for your middle and high school students, might be these audiobooks and podcasts. And that kind of brings me to my next suggestion here. Taking time to slow down and share stories. Everybody's so busy all the time. Many times it's rare for families to sit down and even have time to eat dinner together, whether it's, trying to get somebody to a late night ice rink for hockey practice, or, somebody else has a club going on after school. But just trying to maybe slow down and find some time to share stories, and talk about your day, talk about the news, talk about what's been going on, and put the phones down. And that kind of takes me to my next point here. Taking time to talk about current events. This is more relevant today than it's probably ever been before. And our teens are exposed to a wealth of media sources, like TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat. So let's teach them to be critical consumers of information. And let's also maybe teach them to tap into some relevant news sources that might interest them. Whether it's, getting them, talking to them about some credible news sites and reporters, or, people that influential people they can follow on Twitter, whether it's, looking at Newsella or Tween Tribune through Smithsonian, Scholastic News Online. These are all really great sources that are specifically geared towards teenagers, and helping to kind of, with media, being critical consumers of media and information. And then I also think it's important with that to talk to them about how to evaluate a news source. What is, how credible is the source? How do we know how credible is it? Is the author or speaker reliable? How accurate is it? Who's the authority or the expert being shared in this source? Is there any potential bias? And really having these critical conversations with your students will help promote literacy at home. So maybe one of the silver linings of the pandemic that we've been experiencing for the last year or so is that board games are kind of making a comeback. And there are a lot of board games out there that are really great for supporting and building literacy skills for a variety of ages. Codenames, for instance, asks players to make connections between seemingly random words, and trying to build some vocabulary and some context knowledge there. Apples to Apples, Cranium, Scrabble, Taboo, any game that's going to kind of promote vocabulary, critical thinking, debate, discussion, analysis. All of those games are going to help build and support literacy skills, and it doesn't feel like you are working on literacy skills. It always comes back, though, to our reluctant readers. And what do we do when we have reluctant readers? So if you're thinking about your child that's pretty resistant to reading, or engaging in literacy in a variety of ways, again, kind of go back to that one goal that you might have for the month. Maybe it is to just try and find 20 minutes to read each day. And if that's the case, let them follow their interests. Help them find books that are interesting to them. Maybe they are, if you've got a student that loves art, maybe it's trying to find some books that appeal to the artist in them. But let them follow their interests, because trust me, it is not going to make them less reluctant if you force them to read a particular book. You might also have a student that could really benefit from trying out graphic novels. If you aren't familiar with graphic novels, these are kind of the modernized version of comic books, illustrated books, but they don't have that, they shouldn't have that comic book stigma that sometimes comes with comic books. Graphic novels are great because some of our readers need to see that image in their head, and they become resistant because they have a hard time seeing that image, and graphic novels can, kind of fill that space for them. Also thinking about helping your child find books that have characters that reflect their own experiences. I was at a conference and I was listening to Jason Reynolds talk. And if you're not familiar with him, he is an African-American male author who's written tons of young adult books. And he said he did not read a book until he was outside of college. And in talking to teachers and professors, his comment was always, why do I want to read a book where I don't see myself? And so he had never had an experience about reading a book about another African-American male. And so trying to find books with characters that reflect your kids' experiences and your kids' lives, that can pull in some of our reluctant readers. Think about, how to get techie. Our teens are attached to their phones, so let's try and find a way to show them that the phone doesn't always have to be about Snapchat and TikTok. We can do ebooks on there, audiobooks, podcasts, getting them to, follow some authors and some bookstagrammers on Instagram and really kind of promote some of those literacy supports as well. And then I cannot stress it enough. Be a model for your kids and carve out some time to read. Model that for them, show them that you enjoy it, and then hopefully it is contagious as well. So to kind of come back to this idea of one goal, I talked about a variety of things, from reading aloud to a home library of sorts, to board games, to podcasts. Really think about what is one thing that you can commit to working on in your home, and then commit to that for 3 or 4 weeks and really try and build that habit. They say it takes 21 straight days to make something a habit. So maybe it's committing to it for 21 days. See how it goes and then add another goal. So I do have some resources for supporting literacy. And I cannot stress it enough to really tap into our local libraries, whether it's the Orion Township Library or the media specialist at your school. They are a wealth of knowledge. They can help if you and your child are struggling to find something to read. They can help with that. They've got lists and knowledge and staff that has read more books than I could ever imagine to read. If you have a high schooler, maybe check out Epic Reads. It's a pretty extensive website that I love using for kind of figuring out what to read next. They have all sorts of book lists. If you liked The Hunger Games, then maybe check out one of these 30 books and so forth. They're also really active on social media like Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And so they're constantly posting book recommendations and new releases, author interviews, that kind of stuff. Book Riot is actually a website for everyone, children all the way up through adults. If you go to their website, there is a tab for children readers, and then there's also a tab for teen readers. And they are kind of similar to Epic Reads in that they've got a ton of lists and ton of suggestions and book reviews and recommendations. Brightly is a website that if you are looking for a particular maybe theme, if you were looking for, you know, nonfiction books on social justice issues for your teenager, they've got some great recommendations there. Most of their lists are broken down thematically. Riveted by Simon Team. Riveted actually posts, I want to say it's like 5 or 6 ebooks for free each month. And so as long as you have a web browser, whether it's on a computer or whether it's on your phone, and you sign up for a free account with Riveted, you can read some of their free books. And then back before break, I did a session on book suggestions for reluctant readers. And the tiny URL that I have there has that entire presentation in PDF form with, I mean, I don't even know how many books I recommended on there, 100 maybe. So if you're looking for a book recommendation, that might be helpful as well. So you can copy that URL down. That's really kind of it. I cannot stress the importance enough about working on literacy skills with your child, especially when it, you know, everybody gets busy and it's hard trying to carve out that, you know, 20, 30 minutes of time each day, whether it's in the car or at dinner or before bed, to really kind of work on some aspect of literacy, whether it's reading or writing or speaking and listening and engaging in these critical conversations surrounding the media and books and texts. So, to wrap things up, does anybody have any questions, anything that you're kind of wondering about that I can try and answer? I know our session was not even close to a full hour tonight, but I do have time to answer questions if you have them. All right. Well, the recording of this will be posted in the next couple of days as well. But you are also more than welcome to reach out to me if you have more questions. Again, I'm Kelly Day, and I'm one of our instructional coaches.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks, Carrie. Thank you for attending, everyone.